The space station Meridian hung in the void between three star systems, a massive wheel of metal and glass that served as neutral ground for dozens of alien species. Marcus Chen had called this place home for the past 5 years, working as the station's chief bookkeeper in a small office tucked away in the administrative sector. Most days, he preferred the quiet hum of his computer systems to the chaos of the main commercial districts. Today was different. Today, the entire station buzzed with an energy that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Another challenge match," muttered Crix, the four-armed Zelen who worked as Marcus's assistant. His scaled hands moved quickly across multiple data pads as he spoke. "Third one this week. The betting pools are going crazy." Marcus looked up from his financial reports. Through his office window, he could see crowds gathering near the central arena. The space normally used for trade negotiations and cultural exchanges had been converted into something far more primitive, a fighting ring. "Who's the challenger this time?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would make his stomach turn. "Vextar the Render," Crix replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Cronin Alpha. He's beaten every male who's faced him. The Thrakari champion lasted less than 5 minutes. The Zelen warrior caste leader didn't even make it that long." Marcus had heard the stories. Vexatar stood nearly 10 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in thick, armor-like skin that could deflect most weapons. His species, the Cronins, were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who settled disputes through combat. What made Vextar unusual, even among his own kind, was his obsession with proving his dominance over every other species. "He's not just fighting them," Crix continued, his voice barely audible. "He's humiliating them, making them submit completely before he lets them yield. Station security won't intervene because technically all the fights are consensual." Marcus turned back to his screen, but the numbers blurred together. He'd seen the aftermath of Vextar's challenges. Proud warriors from a dozen species, reduced to broken shells of themselves. Some had left the station immediately after their defeats. Others wandered the corridors like ghosts, their confidence shattered. The communication system crackled to life. "Attention all station residents. Vextar the Render issues an open challenge to any male who believes himself worthy of combat. The arena awaits those with courage." Marcus's hands stilled on his keyboard. The announcement wasn't unusual. Vextar had been issuing these challenges daily since arriving 2 weeks ago. What caught Marcus's attention was the subtle change in wording. Any male instead of any warrior. The net was widening. "He's running out of fighters," Crix observed. "Most of the warrior-class males have already faced him or left the station. He'll start looking at civilians soon." The thought sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He was as civilian as they came, 34 years old, average height, with the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time indoors. His most dangerous skill was finding discrepancies in quarterly reports. "The Andromedans are taking bets on whether he'll challenge the merchants next," Crix added. "Or the technical staff." Marcus saved his work and stood up. "I need some air." He left his office and walked through the station's corridors, past the usual mix of aliens going about their daily business. But there was a tension in the air, a sense that normal life had been suspended. Groups clustered around public screens showing footage from previous fights. Others spoke in hushed tones about who might be next. Near the market district, Marcus encountered a group of Thrakari traders. Their reptilian features were drawn with worry, their usually confident postures subdued. One of them, a female named Sithka, who often helped with station supply contracts, spotted Marcus approaching. "Human, Marcus," she called out, her voice carrying the slight hiss common to her species. "You have heard about the Cronin?" "Hard not to," Marcus replied. "The whole station's talking about it." "He shames us all," another Thrakari said, his crest flattened against his skull in distress. "Our champion, Zektar, trained for 20 cycles. He was swift, skilled, honorable. The Cronin broke him in minutes. Sithka's eyes, large and amber, fixed on Marcus. The Cronin speaks of honor, of testing strength. But this is not honor. This is cruelty. Marcus nodded. He'd watched some of the fight recordings, though they made him sick. Vextar didn't just win. He dominated completely. He would toy with his opponents, demonstrating his superiority in every aspect of combat before forcing their surrender. "What does he want?" Marcus asked. "I mean, what's the point?" "Dominance," Sithka replied simply. "In Cronin culture, the Alpha rules through fear and respect. He seeks to establish himself as the ultimate Alpha, not just of his own species, but of all species." "And it's working," the other Thrakari added bitterly. "Already some trading negotiations have shifted in favor of Cronin interests. Fear makes people compliant." Marcus continued his walk, the Thrakari's words echoing in his mind. He'd always prided himself on understanding the complex web of relationships that kept the station functioning. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, diplomatic protocols. They all required careful balance and mutual respect. Vextar was destroying that balance, replacing cooperation with intimidation. The human quarters were quieter than usual. Many of the human residents worked in technical or administrative roles, and most had been keeping low profile since Vextar's arrival. Marcus passed the recreation area where a few humans sat watching news feeds from Earth. "Marcus!" called out Janet Morrison, one of the station's engineers. "Come join us. We're watching the latest from home." Marcus shook his head. "Maybe later. Need to clear my head first." He found himself at one of the observation decks, staring out at the stars. The view usually calmed him, but today it felt different. Somewhere out there, billions of beings lived their lives, worked, loved, built civilizations. Yet here on this tiny station, one individual was systematically destroying the confidence and dignity of anyone who opposed him. "Beautiful view," a deep voice rumbled behind him. Marcus turned to find himself face to face with Vextar himself. The Cronin was even more imposing up close, his massive frame filling the doorway. His skin was a deep gray-green, marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. His eyes, a startling yellow, regarded Marcus with what might have been curiosity. "Yes," Marcus managed, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. "It helps put things in perspective." Vextar stepped onto the observation deck, his heavy footsteps echoing in the small space. "Perspective? An interesting concept. What perspective do you see? Little human?" Marcus felt the urge to step back, but resisted. "I see a lot of different worlds, different species, all managing to coexist. It's actually pretty remarkable when you think about it." "Coexistence," Vextar repeated, as if testing the word. "Is that what you call it, when the strong pretend to be equal to the weak?" "I'd call it civilization," Marcus replied. "The strong helping the weak contributing what they can, everyone finding their place." Vextar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "You humans have such interesting delusions. You speak of equality while your own history is written in conquest and domination." Marcus couldn't argue with that. Human history was indeed bloody, filled with wars and oppression, but it was also filled with progress, with moments when humanity chose cooperation over conflict. "We learned," Marcus said simply. "Eventually." "Did you?" Vextar moved closer, and Marcus caught the scent of ozone and metal. "Or did you simply become too weak to fight anymore?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus realized this wasn't a casual encounter. Vextar was studying him, evaluating him, the way a predator might study potential prey. "I've watched you, Marcus Chen," Vextar continued. "You move through this station like you own it, but you carry no weapons, display no dominance behaviors. You're soft, weak, yet others defer to you. Why?" Marcus's mouth went dry. I'm just the bookkeeper. I help keep the station's finances in order. Just, Vextar mused. Such a small word for such a large responsibility. This station processes millions of credits in trade daily. One error in your books could bankrupt entire worlds. Yet you speak as if you're insignificant. The Cronin circled Marcus slowly, like a shark studying wounded prey. In my culture, such responsibility would be given only to the strongest, most dominant individuals. Those who could be trusted with power because they had already proven their strength. Different cultures, different approaches, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice level. Indeed. Vextar stopped directly in front of Marcus again. Which raises a question. If your culture truly believes the weak can carry such burdens, then surely they would also believe the weak can prove themselves in combat. Marcus's blood turned to ice. I'm not a fighter. No, Vextar agreed. You're not, which makes you perfect. Perfect for what? Vextar's smile revealed teeth like yellow daggers. My next challenge. I've defeated the warriors, the champions, the self-proclaimed strong. But strength comes in many forms, does it not? If I can break the weak, the soft, the civilized, then I prove that all your talk of cooperation and equality is meaningless. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. I won't fight you. Oh, but you will. Vexitar's voice was confident, casual. Because I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. The Cronin reached into a pouch at his side and withdrew a small device. Marcus recognized it as a data pad, but one encrypted with Cronin security protocols. Inside this device are the complete financial records of every Cronin trade agreement on this station, Vextar said. Shipping manifests, cargo contents, destination codes, everything. Marcus frowned. Why would I want that? Because some of those shipments aren't what they claim to be. Weapons moving to embargoed systems, biological samples that violate interspecies treaties. Currency transfers that fund less than legal activities. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If what Vextar was saying was true, the station could be shut down, its administrators arrested, its purpose as neutral ground permanently destroyed. You're smuggling, Marcus breathed. We're surviving, Vextar corrected, as all species do. But survival requires strength, and strength requires resources. These irregularities provide those resources. And if I fight you? When you fight me, Vextar corrected, and when you lose, this information disappears. Your precious station continues operating. Your friends keep their jobs. Your carefully balanced civilization continues its slow decay. Marcus stared at the datapad, his mind racing. And if I win? Vextar's laugh was genuine this time. You won't. But if by some miracle you did, the information is yours to do with as you please. Plus, I leave this station and never return. This is blackmail. This is evolution, Vextar replied. The strong consuming the weak. Natural selection in action. Marcus looked out at the stars again, seeing them differently now. Not as symbols of hope and cooperation, but as cold, distant points of light in an uncaring universe. A universe where might still made right, where civilization was just a thin veneer over ancient brutality. When? He asked quietly. 3 days, Vextar replied. That should give you time to prepare, or perhaps to run, though running would be unfortunate for your friends here. The Cronin turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. I should mention, the fight will be broadcast throughout the station, and beyond. Several of my associates are quite interested in seeing how this experiment concludes. Marcus remained on the observation deck long after Vextar left, staring out at the stars and wondering how he'd gone from balancing books to facing a 10-foot-tall alien warrior in single combat. The worst part was that he understood Vextar's logic. In the harsh reality of an indifferent universe, strength did matter. The strong survived and prospered while the weak were consumed. But humans had found another way. Not through individual strength, but through collective intelligence, through cooperation, innovation, and the willingness to help each other overcome seemingly impossible odds. The question was, could one middle-aged bookkeeper prove that civilization was stronger than barbarism? Marcus looked down at his soft hands. Hands that had never held anything more dangerous than a data stylus. In 3 days, those hands would either find a way to defeat a legendary warrior or watch everything he cared about crumble. The stars offered no answers, only cold, distant light. Marcus spent the first night after his encounter with Vextar sitting in his quarters, staring at financial reports without seeing them. His mind kept circling back to the same impossible question. How does an accountant defeat a warrior who has never lost a fight? The answer, he realized, was that he didn't. At least, not in the way everyone expected. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office earlier than usual. Crix was already there, his 4 arms moving frantically across multiple data displays. The Zealon looked up as Marcus entered, his scaled features showing concern. "The betting pools have you at 5,000 to 1 odds," Crix said without preamble. "Some books aren't even taking bets anymore. They're calling it execution, not combat." Marcus sat down at his desk and opened his personal files. "Maybe they're right." "You can't seriously be going through with this," Crix said, abandoning his work to face Marcus fully. "Vexitar has killed opponents before. Not here, but on other stations, other worlds, when someone challenges his authority too directly." "I'm not challenging his authority," Marcus replied, scrolling through personnel records. "I'm accepting his invitation." Crix's crest flattened against his skull, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. "This isn't a joke, Marcus. That Cronin will tear you apart." "Probably." Marcus found what he was looking for and transferred several files to a secure drive. "But maybe not in the way he expects." Over the next hour, Marcus made several discreet communications. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would draw attention. Just routine administrative tasks, the kind of boring clerical work that kept the station running and that most people ignored completely. His first stop was the medical bay, where Dr. Sarah Kim was reviewing patient charts. The Korean-American physician looked up as Marcus entered, her expression immediately shifting from professional courtesy to concern. "Marcus, please tell me you're here for a routine checkup and not because you're actually planning to fight that monster." "I need to understand Cronin physiology," Marcus said, taking a seat across from her desk. "Everything you can tell me, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, anything that might help." Dr. Kim leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus's face. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious." She sighed and pulled up a holographic display showing a generic Cronin anatomy. The figure rotated slowly, revealing the species' impressive physical structure. "They're essentially living tanks," Dr. Kim began. "Muscle density approximately 3 times that of humans. Bone structure reinforced with calcium carbonate deposits that make them incredibly difficult to injure. Their skin secretes a natural hardening agent that provides additional protection." "Weaknesses?" Marcus asked. "Few and far between. Their enhanced muscle mass requires enormous amounts of oxygen, so extended exertion can leave them winded. But we're talking about fights that would need to last hours, and no opponent has kept Vextar engaged for more than 15 minutes. Dr. Kim manipulated the hologram, highlighting the Cronin's sensory organs. "Their hearing is actually more sensitive than ours, adapted to their homeworld's thin atmosphere. Sudden loud noises can be disorienting, and their eyes, while excellent in low light, can be overwhelmed by bright flashes." Marcus nodded, memorizing every detail. "What about psychology? How do they think?" "Hierarchical to the extreme. Everything is about dominance and submission. They respect only strength, and they measure strength primarily through physical combat. It's not just cultural, it's hardwired into their brain structure. So reasoning with him is out of the question. Completely. To a Cronin like Vextar. Words without the strength to back them up are just noise. Marcus thanked Dr. Kim and made his second stop, the engineering section. Janet Morrison was working on power distribution algorithms when he found her, her hands dancing across haptic controls as she optimized energy flow throughout the station. "Marcus," she said, looking up from her work, "please tell me you're here to ask about backup generators and not about that insane challenge." "I need to understand the arena," Marcus said. "Power systems, environmental controls, structural weak points, everything." Janet's expression grew grim. "You're really doing this?" "I don't have a choice." She pulled up the arena's technical specifications on her display. The space was a converted conference hall, roughly 50 meters in diameter with a reinforced floor and transparent aluminum barriers to protect spectators. "The lighting system uses standard full-spectrum panels," Janet explained, "controlled from a booth overlooking the arena. Environmental systems maintain standard Class M atmosphere. Temperature, humidity, gravity all set to station norms." "Can those systems be adjusted?" Janet frowned. "The controls are locked during official events to prevent tampering. Why?" Marcus studied the technical readouts, his mind working through possibilities. "Just curious about contingencies." His third stop was the communications center, where Lieutenant Torres was monitoring interstellar transmissions. The former Earth-Navy officer looked up as Marcus approached, his weathered face showing the kind of concern that came from military experience. "Chen," Torres said simply, "heard about your situation. Wanted to offer some advice." "I'm listening." Torres leaned back in his chair. "I've seen combat. Real combat, not arena spectacles. The key isn't being stronger or faster than your opponent. It's being smarter, understanding what they expect, and giving them something different." "What does Vextar expect?" "Fear, submission, traditional combat responses, fight or flight, usually flight. He's fought dozens of opponents, and they all followed the same pattern. They tried to match his strength with their own strength." Marcus nodded. "And lost. Every time. Because they played his game by his rules." Torres pulled up recordings of several of Vextar's previous fights. "Watch how he moves. He's not just fighting. He's performing. Every action is designed to demonstrate dominance, to break his opponent's will as much as their body." Marcus watched the recordings, studying Vextar's patterns. The Cronin was indeed theatrical in his combat style, using intimidation as much as physical force. "So what do I do that's different?" Marcus asked. Torres smiled grimly. "You do what humans do best. You adapt. You improvise. You refuse to play by the rules everyone else accepts." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation that looked like routine administrative work. Marcus filed reports, balanced accounts, processed trade agreements. To anyone watching, he appeared to be a man going through normal motions while facing inevitable defeat. But beneath the surface, Marcus was building something. Not a strategy for winning a fight, but a framework for changing the nature of the fight itself. The second day brought visitors to his office. Sithka arrived first, accompanied by 3 other Thrakari traders. Their reptilian features were set in expressions of formal respect. "Human Marcus," Sithka said, "we come to offer assistance." Marcus looked up from his work. "What kind of assistance?" "Information, resources, whatever you need to face the Cronin." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise her. "Because you are fighting for all of us. Every species Vextar has humiliated, every individual who believes cooperation is stronger than domination." Marcus felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He'd thought this was about protecting the station, but he was beginning to understand it was about something larger. A battle between two philosophies, the ancient law of might makes right versus the newer ideal of civilized cooperation. I appreciate the offer, Marcus said, but I need to do this alone. Why? One of the other Thrakari asked. Pride? Strategy, Marcus replied. Vextar expects a certain response. If I show up with allies, with weapons, with obvious preparations, he'll adapt. I need him to underestimate me completely. More visitors came throughout the day. Engineers offered technical assistance. Merchants promised financial support. Even some of the warriors who had faced Vextar and lost stopped by to offer advice or equipment. Each time, Marcus politely declined. Not because he didn't appreciate their support, but because he was beginning to understand something crucial about the coming confrontation. This wasn't about him defeating Vextar. It was about proving that the values they all shared, cooperation, mutual respect, the strength of community, were more powerful than individual dominance. The evening of the second day, Marcus sat in his quarters reviewing everything he'd learned: Cronin physiology, arena specifications, combat patterns, but more importantly, he'd studied the economic and social networks that made the station function. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Marcus opened it to find a small group of humans: Dr. Kim, Janet Morrison, Lieutenant Torres, and several others he knew from various departments. We're not here to offer help, Dr. Kim said before Marcus could speak. We're here to say goodbye, and to tell you we're proud of you. Win or lose, Torres added. You're standing up for something important. That matters. Janet stepped forward and pressed a small device into Marcus's hand. Emergency medical beacon, she explained. Dr. Kim insisted. It won't help you win, but it might keep you alive. Marcus looked at the faces around him, humans who had made their lives among the stars, who had chosen cooperation over conquest, who believed in building rather than destroying. Thank you, he said simply. After they left, Marcus spent the night reviewing station personnel files, trade agreements, and financial records. Not looking for weaknesses in Vextar, but understanding the complex web of relationships that bound their small community together. The third day arrived with unusual quiet. Word of the challenge had spread throughout the station, and most residents were either avoiding the arena area entirely or gathering to witness what everyone expected to be a swift and brutal conclusion. Marcus dressed in his standard work clothes: simple gray jumpsuit, soft-soled shoes, no accessories or equipment beyond his standard datapad. He walked through the station's corridors, noting how many beings had gathered despite their fear. Dozens of species, hundreds of individuals, all connected by the fragile bonds of mutual trust and shared purpose. The arena had been prepared according to traditional Cronin customs. A circular space with no obstacles, no weapons, no protection except what the fighters brought themselves. Spectator areas surrounded the combat zone, most of them filled despite the early hour. Vextar was already waiting in the center of the arena. The Cronin had stripped down to minimal clothing, revealing the full extent of his impressive physiology. Muscles like steel cables, skin marked with ritual scars, eyes that burned with absolute confidence. Marcus entered from the opposite side, looking exactly like what he was: a middle-aged accountant who had somehow found himself in an impossible situation. The contrast drew murmurs from the crowd. Some were expressions of sympathy for Marcus. Others were barely concealed excitement at the prospect of witnessing complete domination. Station Commander Walsh, a grizzled human who had overseen Meridian for over a decade, served as the official arbiter. He stood at the arena's edge, looking deeply uncomfortable with the entire proceeding. This combat is sanctioned under Cronin cultural law and interspecies treaty, Walsh announced, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's acoustics. The challenge has been issued and accepted. Combat will continue until one participant yields or is unable to continue. Vextar raised his arms, acknowledging the crowd's attention. His voice boomed across the arena. I am Vextar the Render, Alpha of the Cronin, undefeated champion of 7 worlds. Today I face... He paused, looking at Marcus with obvious disdain. A bookkeeper. A soft, weak human who believes numbers are more powerful than strength. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see how Marcus would respond. Traditional protocol called for the challenged fighter to make his own declaration, to state his qualifications and intentions. Instead, Marcus walked calmly to the center of the arena and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried to every corner of the space. My name is Marcus Chen. I keep the books for this station. I make sure everyone gets paid fairly, that trade agreements are honored, that the complex systems keeping us all alive continue to function. Today I'm here to show that strength comes in many forms. Vextar laughed, the sound echoing off the arena walls. Strength? You know nothing of strength, little human, but you will learn. Commander Walsh raised his hand. Combatants, prepare yourselves. Marcus removed his data pad and set it carefully on the arena floor. Then he straightened up and faced Vextar, his hands empty, his posture calm. Vextar crouched into a combat stance, muscles coiled like springs ready to unleash devastating force. Begin! Walsh shouted. For a moment, neither fighter moved. Vextar seemed to be savoring the moment, enjoying the fear he expected to see in his opponent's eyes. Instead, he found something unexpected. Marcus was studying him with the same calm attention he might give to a particularly complex financial report. Then, Vextar attacked. Vextar's charge was devastating in its speed and power, 10 feet of armored muscle moving with the grace of a predator and the force of a freight hauler. Most opponents would have been crushed by the initial impact, their bones shattered and their will broken before they could even begin to fight back. Marcus stepped aside, not a desperate dive or panicked scramble, but a precise, economical movement that carried him just far enough to avoid Vextar's grasp. The Cronin's momentum carried him past his target, and he had to catch himself to avoid stumbling. The crowd gasped. In all of Vextar's previous fights, his opening charge had either connected immediately or forced his opponent into a defensive position from which they never recovered. Vextar turned, his yellow eyes showing the first hint of surprise. Lucky, he growled. Marcus said nothing. He watched Vextar with the same calm attention as before, as if the near miss had been expected rather than miraculous. The Cronin attacked again, this time more cautiously. A series of powerful swipes aimed at crushing Marcus against the arena wall. Each blow carried enough force to shatter concrete, whistling through the air with lethal precision. Marcus avoided them all, not through superior speed or agility, but through careful positioning and timing. He moved like someone who had studied the attack patterns extensively, who knew exactly when and where each strike would come. Stand still and fight, Vextar roared, growing frustrated with his inability to connect. I am fighting, Marcus replied quietly. Just not the way you expected. The exchange continued for several minutes, Vextar growing increasingly aggressive while Marcus remained elusive. To the untrained eye, it looked like a doomed man desperately avoiding his fate. But a few observers began to notice something else. Marcus wasn't just running. He was leading. Every movement drew Vextar further from the center of the arena. Every dodge positioned the Cronin exactly where Marcus seemed to want him. The human was conducting a careful dance, and his massive partner was following steps he didn't realize he was learning. Dr. Kim, watching from the medical section, saw it first. He's wearing him down, she whispered to Janet Morrison. Look at Vextar's breathing. The Cronin's enhanced physiology was indeed beginning to show strain. His massive muscle structure required enormous amounts of oxygen, and the extended chase was taking its toll. His attacks were becoming slightly slower, his reactions marginally less precise. but Marcus looked as calm as when the fight began. "Impossible," Janet breathed. "How is he keeping this up?" The answer lay in something Marcus had learned during his research: efficiency. While Vexitar was expending enormous energy trying to crush his opponent, Marcus was using minimal movement and maximum leverage. Every step was calculated, every motion designed to achieve the greatest result with the least effort. "Enough games!" Vexitar bellowed. He abandoned his careful approach and launched into a berserker assault, raining blows that could have demolished a small building. Marcus danced between them, his movements now flowing like water around stone. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to do something that no opponent had ever done to Vexitar the Render. He began to make the Cronin look foolish. Each missed attack was more spectacular than the last. Each failed charge left Vexitar further out of position. The crowd, initially silent with tension, began to murmur as they realized what they were witnessing. A warrior of legendary skill being systematically frustrated by a man who shouldn't have lasted 30 seconds. "This is not combat," Vexitar raged. "This is cowardice!" Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the arena. "No, this is adaptation." He stopped moving and turned to face Vexitar directly. For the first time since the fight began, the human looked ready to engage rather than evade. Vexitar, breathing heavily but still formidable, approached more cautiously. This was clearly a trap of some kind, but his pride wouldn't allow him to refuse a direct challenge. "You want to see what strength really looks like?" Marcus asked, reaching into his pocket. Vexitar tensed, expecting some kind of weapon. Instead, Marcus withdrew a small communicator and spoke a single word: "Now." Throughout the station, systems that had been quietly modified over the past 3 days activated simultaneously. Not weapons or traps, but tools of administration and efficiency. The arena's lighting system, controlled from the engineering booth, shifted to a strobing pattern that Janet Morrison had programmed based on Dr. Kim's research into Cronin sensory vulnerabilities. The frequency was precisely calibrated to be disorienting to Cronin vision while remaining tolerable for other species. The environmental systems, accessed through Marcus's administrative privileges, began cycling through rapid temperature changes. Nothing dangerous, but enough to trigger the autonomic responses of a species adapted to their homeworld's stable climate. The communication array, linked through Lieutenant Torres's contacts, began broadcasting a subsonic hum that resonated with the natural frequency of Cronin bone structure, creating a deep, unsettling vibration that affected balance and coordination. None of these measures would have been enough to stop a healthy, prepared Cronin. But Vexitar was exhausted from the extended chase, his sensory systems already strained, his confidence shaken by his inability to land a single blow. The combined assault on his senses sent him staggering. For the first time in his adult life, Vexitar the Render looked vulnerable. But Marcus wasn't finished. From his other pocket, he withdrew his data pad and activated a program he'd been working on since accepting the challenge. "You wanted to know about strength," Marcus said, his voice now carrying with perfect clarity despite the chaos of lights and sound around them. "Let me show you the strength of cooperation." The arena's main display screens, linked to the station's communication network, began showing data. Not random information, but a carefully assembled presentation that told a story. Financial records from the past 5 years, showing how the station had grown from a marginal trading post to a major commercial hub. Employment statistics demonstrating how dozens of species had found prosperity working together. Medical records proving that interspecies cooperation had led to breakthroughs in treating diseases that had plagued individual worlds for centuries. "Every number represents a life improved," Marcus continued, walking calmly toward the disoriented Vexitar. "Every transaction represents trust between species who had never met before. Every agreement represents the choice to build rather than destroy. The display showed more data, security reports proving that crime rates had dropped as the station's cooperative culture developed. Environmental statistics showing how shared resources and coordinated planning had created sustainable growth. Educational records demonstrating how knowledge shared between species had accelerated technological advancement for everyone involved. "This is the strength you want to destroy," Marcus said. "Not the strength of muscle or claw, but the strength of minds working together. The strength of trust. The strength of choosing to help rather than harm." Vextar shook his head, fighting off the sensory assault. "Pretty words," he snarled. "But words don't win fights." "No," Marcus agreed. "But this will." He activated the final program on his datapad. For 3 days, while seeming to go about his normal business, Marcus had been quietly adjusting financial records throughout the station. Nothing illegal or fraudulent, but a series of small changes that demonstrated the incredible complexity of the systems he managed daily. Every business on the station depended on the financial network Marcus maintained. Every payroll, every trade agreement, every resource allocation flowed through systems he controlled. With a few keystrokes, he could freeze accounts, suspend operations, or redirect resources. The arena displays showed exactly what that power looked like when applied systematically. Account freezes that would strand visiting ships, contract suspensions that would halt cargo operations, resource redirections that would leave entire sections of the station without power or life support. "I could crash this station's economy with a few keystrokes," Marcus said simply. "I could make it so that no trade agreement signed here would be honored anywhere in the galaxy. I could turn this neutral ground into a dead zone that no one would ever visit again." The implications hit the crowd like a physical wave. They were seeing the true extent of the quiet power that kept their world functioning. Not the obvious strength of weapons or muscle, but the invisible strength of trust, competence, and responsibility. "But I won't," Marcus continued, "because that would hurt innocent people, because cooperation is more powerful than destruction, because choosing to help rather than harm is what makes civilization possible." Vextar steadied himself, fighting through the disorientation and confusion. His warrior's instincts were telling him to attack, to use his superior physical strength to end this strange confrontation. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure that physical strength was the solution. "You think your tricks make you strong?" he demanded. "No," Marcus replied. "I think my friends make me strong." As if summoned by his words, the arena began to fill with voices, not the crowd's reaction to the fight, but something far more powerful, the sound of the station community expressing its support. Dr. Kim's voice came over the medical emergency channel. "Marcus, your vital signs are stable. You're doing great." Janet Morrison spoke from the engineering booth. "All systems running smoothly, Marcus. We've got your back." Lieutenant Torres added his support from the communications center. "Looking good down there, Chen. Keep it up." One by one, dozens of voices joined in. Humans, Thrakari, Zelans, Andromedans, representatives of every species on the station, not offering to fight for Marcus, but simply letting him know he wasn't alone. Sithika's voice carried clearly over the others. "You fight for all of us, human Marcus. We stand with you." The power of it was overwhelming. Not the raw force of physical dominance, but the quiet strength of community. The knowledge that dozens of beings trusted Marcus enough to put their lives and livelihoods in his hands. The understanding that his quiet competence had made their peaceful cooperation possible. Vextar staggered under the weight of it all. His entire worldview was built on the concept of individual dominance, of alpha males ruling through fear and strength. But here was something his philosophy couldn't explain or defeat. Power freely given rather than taken, strength shared rather than hoarded, leadership earned through service rather than conquest. "This isn't possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chorus of support. "It's not just possible," Marcus replied. "It's inevitable. This is how civilizations grow, not through conquest, but through cooperation, not by crushing the weak, but by helping them become strong." Marcus walked closer to Vextar, no longer avoiding or evading. The Cronin could have struck him down easily, but something held him back. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was confusion. Or perhaps for the first time in his life he was experiencing doubt about the fundamental beliefs that had shaped his existence. "You wanted to prove that strength conquers all," Marcus said. "But you've only proven that isolated strength is limited strength. I'm not stronger than you, but we, all of us working together, are stronger than any individual could ever be." The sensory assault gradually faded as the environmental systems returned to normal. The strobing lights steadied. The subsonic hum quieted. But the voices of the community continued, a gentle reminder that Marcus wasn't facing this challenge alone. Vexitar looked around the arena, seeing the faces of beings he had dismissed as weak and inferior. He saw the complex technological systems that kept them all alive, systems that required not just individual skill but coordinated effort. He saw the evidence of prosperity built through cooperation rather than conquest. For the first time in his adult life, Vextar the Render began to understand that there might be forms of strength he had never considered. "You have not defeated me in combat," he said finally. "No," Marcus agreed. "But I've shown you something more important than victory in combat. I've shown you what we can accomplish when we choose to work together instead of tear each other down." Vextar was silent for a long moment, his massive frame still radiating physical power but somehow seeming smaller in the face of what he had witnessed. "The data you promised," Marcus said quietly. "The information about illegal activities." Vextar reached into his pouch and withdrew the encrypted datapad. But instead of handing it to Marcus, he activated the device and began transferring its contents to the arena's public display system. "I am Vextar the Render," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the arena. "I came here to prove that individual strength was superior to collective weakness. Instead, I have learned that my understanding of strength was incomplete." The data scrolled across the displays. Shipping manifests for illegal weapons, financial records of embargoed transactions, cargo manifests for biological samples that violated a dozen interspecies treaties, all bearing Cronin authorization codes. "My people have survived through strength and cunning," Vextar continued. "We took what we needed and crushed those who opposed us. I believe this made us superior to species who chose cooperation over conquest." He looked directly at Marcus. "I was wrong." The arena fell completely silent. No one had expected this turn of events. "I have never yielded in combat," Vextar said. "I do not yield now, but I acknowledge that victory in combat is not the only measure of strength. You have shown me power I did not know existed." He turned to address the entire crowd. "I leave this station as I promised. The human Marcus has proven that his way of strength, cooperation, trust, shared responsibility creates something greater than any individual could achieve alone." Vextar walked toward the arena exit, then paused and looked back at Marcus one final time. "You were right about one thing, Bookkeeper. Adaptation is the key to survival. My people will need to learn new forms of strength if we are to thrive among the stars." As the massive Cronin left the arena, the crowd remained silent for several seconds. Then, slowly, applause began. Not the wild cheering of victory in combat, but the quiet, respectful acknowledgement of something far more significant: the triumph of civilization over barbarism. Marcus retrieved his datapad from the arena floor and walked toward the exit. Dr. Kim met him at the medical station, scanner in hand. Any injuries? She asked. Just some bruised dignity, Marcus replied, and maybe a new understanding of what it means to be strong. Janet Morrison was waiting with Lieutenant Torres and several other friends. How did you know it would work? She asked. Marcus smiled tiredly. I didn't. But I knew that if it didn't work, at least I would have tried something different. Something that honored what we've built here instead of just trying to match his strength with strength. Over the following days, life on the station began to return to normal. The illegal Cronin operations were shut down through proper diplomatic channels. Several species that had been intimidated by Vextar's presence began returning to their normal trading patterns. Marcus returned to his quiet office and his financial reports. But something had changed. The other residents of the station looked at him differently now, not with the fear or respect given to a warrior, but with the deeper appreciation reserved for someone who had stood up for their values when it mattered most. A week after the confrontation, Marcus received a message through the Interstellar Communication Network. The sender was identified as Vextar, now traveling on a Cronin merchant vessel 3 systems away. The message was brief. Human Marcus, I have been thinking about strength, about cooperation, about what it means to adapt. My ship carries trade goods instead of weapons now. It is different. Perhaps better. The Alpha learns new ways. Thank you for the lesson. Marcus smiled and filed the message with his personal correspondence. Outside his office window, the life of the station continued. Dozens of species working together, trading, learning, building something greater than any of them could have achieved alone. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes, still conflicts, still individuals who preferred domination to cooperation. But for now, at least, the balance held. Civilization had proven itself stronger than barbarism, not through superior force, but through the patient work of building trust and demonstrating that there were better ways to live. Marcus turned back to his financial reports, content in the knowledge that sometimes the most important battles were won not with fists or weapons, but with spreadsheets and the quiet strength of a community that chose cooperation over conquest. The stars outside continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who traveled between them. But on one small station spinning in the void, a middle-aged bookkeeper had proven that civilization could triumph over barbarism, that cooperation was stronger than domination, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from crushing your opponents, but from showing them a better way to be strong.